GraphQL is a query language that allows developers to query and mutate data within a third-party service. With companies like Shopify and Netflix favoring the GraphQL protocol over the more popular REST protocol, its popularity is only rising. Because of its rise of prominence, it's important to know what GraphQL is, how to use it, and how to implement it in your software development cycle. My name's Justin, and I'm going to be teaching you the basics of GraphQL and how you can implement simple GraphQL queries and mutations in your Apex code. And why is it that companies are going and favoring GraphQL over the REST protocol? The answer is simple. In GraphQL, you can query the exact data that you need. With REST, you oftentimes are faced with multiple dilemmas. Dilemma 1 is you go and need to query multiple endpoints to get the exact data that you need. Dilemma 2 is that inside an individual query, there is substantially more data that is given to you than what is required for your operation. With GraphQL, these potential problems are solved. Also, many companies are going public about their move to the GraphQL backend services. A short list of these companies include Shopify, which has made GraphQL as their preferred service, as well as locking their B2B APIs behind GraphQL. Salesforce, who's recently introduced GraphQL endpoints in the Winter 23 update. And Netflix, who have become public about migrating their GraphQL backend safely. But why is it that companies are so keen on moving to GraphQL? The biggest reason is the ease of retrieving the exact data that you need. Making an API request through REST will return a fixed set of data. This data set returned results in one of two scenarios. More data than required is returned, categorized as overfetching, or not enough data is returned, requiring multiple API calls. This is often referred to as underfetching. GraphQL fixes this by allowing you to specify the exact data requirement in one query. These queries can be built with the exact data required, so the problems of overfetching and underfetching are in the past. Additionally, the ability to specify the exact fields and, this is important, the related objects in one query reduces the need for multiple API calls. Let's take a look at this customer inside of Shopify. We can see a first name, a last name, and we can see a Salesforce ID meta field. If you're unfamiliar with the REST APIs, we would need to make two callouts to get this exact set of data. We would need to make a callout to the customer ID.json endpoint. Additionally, we would need to go and call the customer ID/meta field endpoint. This is not only is this two callouts, but we'll also receive a lot of extra unnecessary data. With GraphQL, we can go and query exactly this data. So we can see here in this query, we'll go and use the ID as a filter, and we'll go ahead and query any fields required, and we can get this meta field, run it, and we'll get this exact data. Brilliant. The other important piece to APIs is modifying the data on your third-party server. Within Shopify, sticking to the customer example, we can see a litany of endpoints related to the customer. We can modify data using not only different endpoints, but also different HTTP methods like get, post, put, delete. With GraphQL, this is consolidated under one endpoint and is used as mutations. An example mutation here is the customer create mutation, where we'll go and feed in data through the input as JSON. We'll feed in the customer fields, and we'll get back customer data as well as any errors received. Let's go ahead and get a demo set up with Shopify and Salesforce. What we'll be doing today is we'll be modifying Shopify data through the Apex client. What we'll need first is we'll need a Shopify partner account and a development store, as well as a Salesforce instance. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the requirements of how to set up your Shopify side. First, we need to go to partners.shopify.com, and we'll want to go ahead and join now and sign up. Once we're in, we can go ahead and navigate to stores and add a store, create a development store, and fill in any necessary data that's required. Additionally, we'll want to go ahead and install this GrapahQL Explorer. You can go ahead and find this by searching GraphQL Explorer. Additionally, all the links are down below for all of this information. We'll want to go ahead and press Install Shopify's GrapahQL app. We'll want to enter our shop domain, and we'll want to grant the necessary permissions. In this use case, I granted the customer's read-write as well as orders read. You can go and modify permissions later on by reinstalling the app. Once the app is installed, you'll be able to see it in your admin panel here, and there'll be a test query. We can go ahead and press run and confirm that the query is working. You can see that we get the name of the shop as a result. One thing to note is the difference between the query syntax from GraphQL and the query syntax inside of Shopify. Shopify prefers the bottom side where there's no query keyword, whereas GraphQL uses the query keyword. These are the same, and Shopify prettier prefers the latter. With that, let's go ahead and get a customer data. So we can go ahead and use the following query here, where the customer is the object. We use an input as ID, and we use the ID of the customer. And then we use different fields. So in this case, first name and last name. Once we run this, we'll go ahead and get the data as first name and last name. Now that you have the basic syntax down of how we're going to query data, we're going to go ahead and set this up for our Salesforce integration. As this is an integration, we'll need to go ahead and create an app. So we can go to Apps, Apps and Sales Channels Settings. We can go ahead and press Develop Apps, and we can create an app. We can call this app Salesforce Integration. Give the app developer your email. And voila, we've created the app. From here, we'll want to ensure the scopes are set up correctly, which we can do so by going to Configuration, configuring the admin API, and selecting the scopes. We'll be using the same scopes as before, which will be the read-write customers and the read orders. We'll go ahead and save this, and we'll go to API credentials, and we'll want to go ahead and install the app. From here, you can see that there's an admin access token, which will be revealed only once. We'll want to write this down in our records, which we'll be using later on to authenticate within Shopify. On the Salesforce side, while you can send this over as strings, I'd recommend using this GraphQL client made by Ilya. This GraphQL client is a great way to go and modify and build queries and retrieve data efficiently. To install this, we can go ahead and check the README down here. I do recommend going and using the SFDX package install method as the easiest way to install data. But you can install this just like a managed package. Keep in mind that this is an unmanaged package, and what that means is that there will be no namespace involved, and so you can modify the code as you feel fit. Once this is installed, you can go ahead and add this in your package.xml, and you can retrieve the source from your manifest to go and download the code back into Salesforce and your VS Code environment. With that, let's jump into VS Code and start building queries. So inside of VS Code, let's go ahead and create a class. We'll call it Shopify GraphQL. And we'll want to go ahead and make the following method. We'll make a method getCustomer with a void return type, And we'll want to go ahead and use these fields to go and build the node. So we'll create a customer field with fields first name and last name, and the argument will be the ID that we use to query the data. We can go ahead and pass the system.debug and build the query to show the end result. Additionally, we'll want to build out code to go and send the query. We can do so with the following method here, which will go and use your Shopify access token as well as your shop URL to go and send any data to your Shopify instance. Obviously, we'll need to go and add the send query back to the original method, so we can do so here. And with that, we can run the Shopify GraphQL.getCustomer inside our execute anonymous, and we will see the getCustomer result. But what if we want something more complicated? Let's say we wanted to get the orders associated with a customer. After all, we want to go and get more complicated data, right? Well, we can use the following GraphQL query here, where we again use the customer, we use the first name as a field, we have orders as a field with an argument of first, and this will be 5, which I'll later change to 1. And then we want a edges with the field node, and the node has a field name. The significance of edges and node has to do with the nature of GraphQL, because graphs in computer science have edges and nodes, where edges are the relationship between two circles and the node is actually the circle. So, little fun fact of the day. If we go ahead and run this, you can see that we'll get not only the first name, but we'll get the order associated as well. Let's go ahead and jump into VS Code and see how we can go and build this out. Inside of VS Code, in the same class, we can go and use the method getCustomersWithOrders, where we're going to go ahead and build a customer field with the with field first name with argument ID. And additionally, we'll want to build an additional field called orders with argument of first. And we'll want to go ahead and do nested fields on the orders. So orders will be with field edges, which will be with field node, which will have this resulting query. And then we can use that same send query method that we used before. Now, what if we want to go and mutate data? We want to create a customer. We can do so with the customer create mutation. You can see here in the syntax we call out mutation, and then we have a specific name for the mutation. In this case, the specific name is customer create. We also define an input type, which is going to be the customer input. And then we go and create a field called customer create, and we'll have an argument with the input, the second $sign input, that will go and store JSON data. We'll go ahead and have a first name, a last name, and the user errors. Inside of variables, we'll want to go ahead and define the input, which we'll define as first name and last name. And we can go ahead and send this. And you can see we have this customer create where we're going to go ahead and have a first name and last name. And there's no errors with this associated customer creation. If we wanted to go and make this within Salesforce, we could go and use the following code, where you have the create customer method. We have a customer create node with the argument of input and input. We have the customer node with fields. Keep in mind we can actually use a list of strings to define fields. And we'll go ahead and use the GraphQL mutation to create them. We'll define the variable type, and then we actually have a wrapper class that goes and stores customer data. And then we'll go ahead and send the mutation. A couple things here that we haven't defined yet. We do need to define a customer class, so we can do a nested class here called customer. And we'll need to define the send mutation. This will take in a GraphQL request as opposed to a GraphQL query. And then we'll go ahead and send this. And that's everything that you need to know to get started with GraphQL and Apex. If you enjoyed this kind of content, let me know by leaving a like down below, commenting, and with that, take care.